Hi guys, it's your boy, Hyperfixation Station here, and we're back with another video, and well, it's a format I haven't done for a long time. Yes, welcome to the long form style of content I do that's kind of like a podcast with extra steps. Yes, this is rant video number 2, and well, we're still doing Halo, okay? We're still doing Halo. I kind of touched on this slightly in the original, but I don't think I really leaned into it much, since the whole concept of that was just, what if we took the Halo Infinite we have now and made it a little bit more like Halo Reach? It's a very stupid video, it really doesn't mean anything, and I don't even believe in any of it at all. And that's connected in large parts to this video, because you see, in this video, lads, what we're gonna do is, well, I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of a peek inside my mind, because I haven't heard a lot of people do something like this. I've heard a lot of people going, oh, a Halo Infinite campaign is really bad. Oh, we should have gotten some Halo Infinite campaign DLC. Oh, I hate Escharum, the asthmatic bastard. And all shit like that, or like, the Endless don't make sense. You know, and then I'm just sitting here and I'm like, well, and I don't just hear, and I just in general really don't hear a lot of people going like, well, what did we imagine Halo Infinite, or should I say, this is how old my opinions on this really are, Halo 6. I don't hear a lot of people talking about what they thought Halo 6's campaign would be. Way before it came out, way before we even knew it was called Halo Infinite, back when all we had was that one teaser trailer, and I still fucking remember everybody thought the Flood was gonna be there, and we were like, well, how the fuck are we gonna, like, mix the Prometheans with the Flood, and, like, the Banished, and it's gonna be cool as fuck, you know, and we were so confused, and yeah, it was a great time to be alive. It was so good. I'm glad that I was a Halo fan back then. But you see, I was a young Halo fan. I would have been, what, like... oh god, I'm trying to think now. Like, oh god, that was like nearly 10 years ago. Fuck me. I would have been like 9, I think, in the build-up to Halo Infinite. Like, between the ages of like 9 to 12, I think. This was a concept I had when I was a lot younger, definitely, and basically, today we're just going to be going over my original concept for Halo Infinite, what I personally originally thought Halo 6 would have been. Basically, to summarize this very briefly before we get into it, basically take the legendary ending of Halo Wars 2 and Halo 5, and then imagine you're a really nerdy, hyperfixated kid who then, like, binge-watched Hidden Xperia's entire Flood playlist, and then made, like, half the campaign Halo 3. But then you also, like, watched Hidden Xperia's other Halo 3 videos, and then you just started basically making it Halo 3 2 343 Boogaloo. Yeah, that was basically what I came up with, and today I just thought I'd share that with you guys, and in the comments, if you would feel so nice to humor me, to, you know, partake in the discussion, maybe put in the comments what you thought Halo 6's campaign was going to be like. I guess we'll sort of do a similar thing to last time, where we go mission by mission. Before we jump in though, as always, with any of my videos, we have some coffee, ladies and gentlemen. Heh. Oh, yes, you better bet we're going to be doing some nice schlubs on that later. So, I guess now with the housekeeping out of the way, we might as well just get right into this. So one of the big things I remember was I was kind of gonna go along the train with the Prometheans of kind of the Halo 5 train, where we were trying to, like, diversify them a little bit and make them more like the Covenant. And one of the ways I was gonna do that was gonna be with vehicles. One of my big concepts was to add Promethean/Forerunner vehicles and ships, and this is good for later. Put Promethean ships in for later, but some of the Promethean vehicle designs I had was stuff like, it was like a bike, sort of like, you know, a bike. Imagine like a sort of light rifle, but with wheels, and then it had torpedoes on it, and then there were like 3 different variants. So one variant would have like torpedo rocket pod things, another variant had like the ramming things from the chopper and had the ability to speed up, and the third variant, I think, had like upward facing anti-air guns, I think. You know, it was literally an anti-air vehicle, which we don't actually have in Halo. I think that's a really cool concept. Obviously, in terms of the UNSC, a lot of my vehicle ideas were like, I still firmly stand by this to this day, I really want the Grizzly tank in mainstream, I was about to say Hoi 4 then, in mainstream Halo. I think that would be good. And the other Forerunner vehicles, I think the tank that I had in mind, sort of their version of the Scorpion, was going to be a sort of like, imagine the Spectre from Halo 2, but it looks kind of like that one tank from Command & Conquer 3, the Nod one, the Scorpion tank. Like, you kind of combine those two together, and it kind of, it fires like a mortar, so it has an arch to it, but it fires from like a tank gun, if that makes sense. And then I think its secondary thing was going to be a sort of coaxial, like, machine gun, basically the Promethean turret. I was also going to actually split the have like 2 or 3 Promethean turrets. So you had one Promethean turret that was like a grenade launcher, another one that was more like a machine gun, and another one that was like, I want to say it was supposed to be a mortar, but I can't remember 100%. And then some of the enemies ideas I had, I didn't have many. I think one of them was for, I'm not even gonna try and name them because I can't remember what I named them. I imagine the names were cringy as fuck. Probably something ChatGPT would fucking come up with. But, yeah. It was like, sort of like stalking enemies, where basically they, imagine sort of like the skirmishers and the drones sort of mixed into one. And then you'll notice that a lot of my brand new quote-unquote designs were basically just taking pre-existing Halo things and mixing them together in a way that people hadn't before. This is another one though, is basically, and just Prometheanizer, and then the whole concept behind it was going to be that they would sort of stalk behind you in hallways, and they would take pot shots at you once your back was turned, but they would hide when you, sort of like horror enemies, I guess. Sort of like, they will shoot you from behind, like when you have your back turned, but as soon as you, sort of like Weeping Angels, I guess, and then when you turn back around, like, they'll try and hide. And, yeah. That was one concept I had for a new enemy for the Prometheans. I think I had another enemy idea, which was basically the Prometheans version of the Engineer from, like, the Engineer more how it's served in the Halo Wars games, where its sole purpose is basically just repairing vehicles, basically like, I guess like a sort of sentinel-like disc, I guess like a watcher, I guess, and it's like a sentinel-like Ball. Kind of like the Didax ship from Halo 4, and then it sort of flies around and it repairs vehicles and stuff. That was another idea. I had lots of other ideas, but I can't really remember all of them. I can't remember any. I know that I had a lot of ideas for new Promethean weapons, but I can't really remember them. I think the Swords of the Abiding Truth are actually supposed to play a very minor role in the campaign as well, so I guess talking about that, I should probably stop stalling and get into the absolute shit show of the campaign that I remember. So, the game would open up with a cutscene essentially taking place exactly where Halo 5 left off, with the Infinity making, an emergency stop outside Sanghelios, with, like, Master Chief and Arbiter sharing some banter and that, and Blue Team going like, oh, who's this guy talking to an elite like that? Hey, bro, we don't talk like that around here. We don't talk like that. And Master Chief and Arbiter, they're just chilling, having their bromance as they do. Meanwhile, Spartan Locke is like, God damn it, I got fucking beat by Master Chief to get to fucking, fucking brooding, and like, they all get on the Infinity, and Halsey basically goes on some rant about how she made Cortana too human, and she gave Cortana her only flaw, ambition, shit like that. Basically a sort of Halsey coming to terms with this reap what I sow sort of thing. And then, like, they're all kind of sitting together, and they're like, well, Cortana's kind of already won, like, Lasky's being all defeatist, and he's like, well, Cortana's already won, so we should just sort of go hide somewhere until, something happens, and then Master Chief is like, nah, man, we can't do that. I didn't go through fucking hell, like, blowing up, like, 5 ancient donuts for you to just throw it all away because you're a little fucking piss baby pussy bitch, and then Arbiter's like, yes, we need to reunite the people, and that, and Arbiter's like, the Swords of Sanghelios will help you, and we need to find the shipmaster. And that basically comes from this one comic that was released in the in-between of Halo 5 and Halo 6, where, like, the shipmaster is doing something, and then he just sort of goes missing, and that's the excuse 343 gave as to why he wasn't in Halo 5, and also wasn't in Halo 6. Still pissed about that, to be perfectly honest. But, yeah, so the Infinity, so they convince Lasky to, trying to wrestle up all the old UNSC guys, and basically the plan is they get as many people as they can, and kind of figure it out from there. This is going to come back for later when a very special ship crew is going to be brought into it. So the first mission takes place on, I can't remember what the name of the human colony was, but it's some kind of outer colony that Cortana hasn't gotten to yet, and a Covenant terrorist group, i.e. the Swords of the Abiding Truth, are doing some weird shit on there, and, Master Chief and Blue Team go there, and they shoot up some peeps, and they end up coming across a sort of Halo 3 style terminal with offensive bias in it. And I mean, if you want a sort of brief run through of my idea for the Swords of the Abiding Truth, basically they're modeled after Halo 2 Covenant, basically. A lot of elites, and that's really it. Like, basically the elites work more like brutes in the way that once you take off, at least higher ranking elites, like Elite Ultras, basically they have a unique gimmick where, like, once you take their helmet, like their shields and their helmet off, which is getting them down to half health, they pull out like an energy sword and, like, do some crazy shit. So, that basically, imagine the Halo 2 Covenant, but mixed in with some concepts from the Halo 4 art style, I guess. You know, so they're gonna be the ones that have, like, the plasma rifle, the needle rifle, the carbine, shit like that. You know, 90% elites and some grunts and jackals mixed in for extra flavor. Pretty much. So, yeah, the main sort of thing with that mission is the end of it, where basically Blue Team comes across, a terminal, a Halo 3 style terminal, and basically, you know, some mysterious AI starts spouting off a load of poetic bullshit, and basically tells them to go somewhere and search for the truth, bringing back that sort of hunt the truth thing. You know, sort of, I guess, touching a bit on what the Harbinger actually does say in Halo Infinite, but I guess hunt the truth in a very different way. You know, basically, the whole thing and the whole gimmick is basically about learning the truth about the Prometheans, which would lead to the one critical weakness, i.e. the one way to actually get to the domain to stop Cortana. You know, but that's not revealed yet. It's very poetic, and it just points the gang toward a shield world. You know, so they get back to the Infinity, and, you know, Blue Team are like, hey, maybe we should go to this shield world, and Lasky's like, but hey, wasn't the plan, like, something to do with, like, getting all the UNSC back together? And Master Chief's like, yeah, but, like, we could go do cool space shit. And Lasky's like, I don't know, I don't think we're powerful enough to do that. And then the Arbiter's like, yeah, Chief, I think you need to chill out and smoke some Zaza. You know, but then Locke's like, you know... But then Locke and Halsey are like, well, we stand by you, Master Chief. You've done the most. And, you know, Locke and Master Chief sort of have this, you know, bonding moment, I guess, which is sort of like their character arc, where basically they get, like, they slowly kind of tolerate each other over the course of the campaign. So yeah, so basically Osiris and Blue Team head off to do their own thing with Halsey, so they head off to go to this shield world, and we're kind of doing a Halo 5 thing with split campaign perspectives, but more in a Halo 2 way, because, well, the other perspective is with the Arbiter and Lasky. So the next mission takes you still as Blue Team as Master Chief as you go to this shield world. And, you get, you know, kind of like Halo Reach, like, there's actual, like, fauna on the shield world, and you don't encounter any swords of the Abiding Truth there. Instead, you encounter some, like, I think they were probably supposed to be leftover Storm Covenant. Like, I don't know, some, like, rogue general or something from the Storm Covenant. Basically the only appearance they make in the game for the first half of this mission. And it's kind of like going through, like, a very swampy, jungly environment. Sort of like an oppressive atmosphere. You know, sort of like a, maybe the Flood are here, maybe they're not, who knows, sort of like a cock tease thing. And then you get a very similar cutscene to that in Halo 5 halfway through, like, but instead of the Warden Eternal, you get, you know, they're trekking through the swamp, and instead of the Warden Eternal, it's actually the Flood. So you get a very similar sequence to Halo CE, where you fight off all the infection forms, and then you have to backtrack through the mission, and all the like, you see the infection forms infecting the corpses of the enemies that you just killed, which I think would be really interesting. There's nothing fancy to do with the Flood in this mission. Basically, you just do that, and then, you clear out some Flood, then the ending cutscene of the mission has you all, like, reach this, like, cliffside, and you're all like, hey, what are we supposed to do, man? And then Locke's like, ha, just watch us more superior Spartan 4s do it. You know, and they fucking wall climb down and, like, jump inside this waterfall thing, and Blue Team eventually figure out a way to follow them, using a more brute force way of doing it, other than literal fucking anti-gravity. you know, and, but as they're doing it, Chief almost falls, because he has another one of his Cortana visions, and Cortana's like, hey, Chief, you sexy thing. I noticed you escaped, and it was, like, kinda not cool, because, for some reason I'm a yandere now, and, I kinda wanna keep you with me, and, that was so totally not cool for you to do, so now I'm coming for your asshole, bitch. You know, and Chief is like, guys, Cortana's coming for us, bro. You know, and, like, the others are like, it'll be fine. You know, and then cut back to Arbiter on the surface of this other human colony. You know, with, like, a squad of ODSTs, because, why the fuck not? And I can't even remember what he was supposed to be doing there. I just remember that he's there. So he's on this human colony, and, the first half is fighting off some Swords of the Abiding Truth alongside some ODSTs and some, like, local policemen and militia. You know, basically saving as many people as you can, and then you have this sort of, like, business meeting with the leader of the colony, and you get him on your side. And, you know, but he's like, hey, man, I've heard, like, Cortana's doing some crazy shit. Cortana just, like, you know, like, fucking bombed out the Brute homeworld, man. Shit's brutal. She's on a fucking warpath towards this one shield world. And Arbiter's like, god damn it, that bitch crazy, yo. And, yeah, and they unite, but then there's like a temporal disturbance, and then you see, some weird ship. It's a red ship, you know, and then, like, and then all the, like, you know, and then, like, Arbiter, like, fights his way through some more servants, the Abiding Truth, back outside, and it's like an escort the president sort of thing. Sort of like, imagining Truth and Reconciliation when you have to escort Captain Keyes, but, better. So basically, yeah, you do that, you escort him out of there, and you see Atriox on all the messages, and he's like, come join the Banished, and you will get my Bionicles, and, you know, maybe we can, like, play Nuketown together, or whatever, or we can go for the Easter egg in, D-Machine, you know, and all that. You know, and, like, all the people are panicking, and, you know, like, the president's like, I stand up to tyrants like that, and he, you know, does all the exposition, basically. Imagine Isabel's speech from Halo Wars 2, but done by this random old guy instead. And, you get to do a little Warthog escape out of here. Basically, like, you get this troop transport Warthog, and you load like, the president, like, all of his militia guards in there, and the ODSTs opt to stay behind, you know, and you have to, like, drive through the highways as, like, the, you know, the Swords of the Abiding Truth and the Banished start fighting in the atmosphere, and all the, like, Banished Red Banshees and all the Swords of the Abiding Truth, like, Halo 2 Banshees are fighting each other, and it's, like, a really cool action sequence. And then eventually it ends with, like, a Sword of the Abiding Truth Phantom crashing into the highway. And that causes the Warthog to, you know, veer off, like, and crash somewhere, you know, and then cut to black. It's all dramatic and shit. And then you cut back to Master Chief's perspective, as the gang are walking through this cave, into this, you know, walking into this mine and they find their way into this, like, abandoned Forerunner mining system. You know, and they find all this weird shit along the walls. You know, like weird carvings, you know, they kind of look like cave paintings, but not entirely, you know, basically ancient human language, you know, and they find a few, like, weird, discarded, like, fossilized tools down there, you know, really high-tech stuff, and they're like, what the fuck's going on, man? You know, and, as they're exploring around, like, you hear some of the flood shit, and then, wait, what the fuck? What the fuck just happened? Oh, okay. For for some reason, I think my MacBook went into some weird mode. I hope that doesn't cause any problems. Probably gonna cut that out. Alright, yeah, so the mission 4 begins with you just exploring, getting some nice environmental detail of, like, you know, giving you a sort of, like, show don't tell intro to ancient human culture in the games, as well as seeing, like, all the cool crystals and that they must have, and ores that they must have been mining down there, until eventually you see some infection forms that you have to fight off. And then you meet some of the new Flood enemies that I thought of, which basically, imagine the Halo Infinite Berserker brutes, basically that, but Flood. Kind of like Flood Juggernauts, but more, and I guess kind of like the Halo Wars 1 things, those weird gorilla things from Halo Wars 1. Kind of imagine those, but they look more like a brute. That's kind of what I was envisioning. You encounter 2 of those, and they chase you. They're kind of like the Flood's version of hunters in this theoretical game of mine. And they chase you deeper into the caverns, into this sort of catacombs. And you look around and you see, like, all of these sarcophagi of what could either be ancient human or ancient forerunner. It's really hard to tell because it's kind of all Egyptian themed. And, you get a jump scare when you, like, go to, like, you know, do a little quick time event. You go to open one of the coffins, and you get a little jump scare because a, you know, like a long, rotted away, skeleton of probably a forerunner or an ancient human. Yet again, at this point, it's hard to tell, and I can't remember what the answer actually is. I genuinely can't remember what it's supposed to be. Then, like, lurches at you, you know, and you know, it's a jump scare thing, you know. And then straight after that, like, you then have an actual puzzle, because puzzles, very simple, basic puzzles was going to be a thing in this game. Basically, just little logic puzzles in some of the Forerunner sections. This one, pretty simple, just as an introduction to this, is a very rarely used mechanic. Basically, you have to decipher a code by the numbers on the side of some of the coffins. You know, they spell out 117, which is supposed to be environmental detail. It's like a, ooh, spooky, it's like they knew you were gonna be here, sort of thing. And, yeah, and doing that and putting the code 117 into, like, what seems to be a terminal in the room, basically hacks a door open, which, you know, which then allows you into another chamber of the catacombs, which then leads you into a little miniature platforming session where you have to use some of those advanced Halo 5 mobility abilities to well, you know, advance you know, in a very, very basic little platforming section, very akin to the very rare times this was used in Halo 5, you know, and which lands you onto a platform, which lands you into your first arena, because you've, like, and it's got, like, loads of sewage pipes and that, and there's loads of what seems to be some sort of noxious gas that's created by the crystals. I guess the environment for this mission is, like, it's a really dark and dingy cave, and you can only really see, think like Resident Evil, I guess, you know, like, definitely Resident Evil 4, sort of, when you're in the underground bit. And then it's supposed to contrast that with, like, the natural beauty of, like, the multicolored crystals and stuff. Yeah, it's supposed to be a pretty cool place. You know, and from all these, like, abandoned, like, what seem to be abandoned Forerunner, like, ancient Forerunner sewage pipes and stuff. You know, you then get loads of infection forms, and you get introduced to another new form of the Flood, which is kind of like this game's replacement for the Stalker. Basically, it's just a sort of, imagine a bat, but it's on all fours, and it sort of crawls around, and it acts kind of like a face hugger. That's basically what this theoretical enemy was, you know, and they also come crawling out of the vents. It's very small, you know, and basically it's just a very small, enclosed area. You know, and you fight your way through that, which then takes you, like, into this section, you know, which then takes you into a section that's, like, nearly halfway through the mission. You know, things haven't really picked up yet. It's a more atmospheric mission than anything, where you encounter another terminal, and totally not offensive Bias starts talking to you again. You know, and and he congratulates you on getting this far, and does some exposition that this is a burial place for the ancient Forerunners. Basically, it's sort of like, you know, what is it? Is it the Valley of Kings in Egypt, where they, like, buried, like, loads of pharaohs underground? It's basically like that, and the catacombs underneath France mixed into one. It's those two concepts mixed into one. Yeah, and he basically does exposition on all that, and he basically says, sort of similar setup to Halo Wars 1, that this shield world used to be fiercely protected by, I don't know, some random installation AI, but sometime a few thousand years ago, it got infected by the Logic Plague, and now the Flood kind of rule this world from the shadows. And they sort of, you know, and they've sort of turned the wildlife of the shield world into a sort of farming system, where they don't needlessly consume them all. They just sort of consume enough of them to survive, but then allow the populations to breed and reseed. Basically hinting that there's some kind of proto-Gravemind / Gravemind intelligence on the planet. You know, and that's basically all, you know, and a definitely not offensive Bias ends his little talking message with you by basically saying that you shouldn't stay in there for too long, because, you know, he detects a pretty large Flood presence underground, so you should try and head out of the eastern exit, because that'll take you near some, like, ruins that are going to supposedly reveal some great secret to you that he doesn't want to spoil the surprise of. You know, just to keep you engaged. So, yeah. He does that. And then you know, and basically, like, the other, you know, the members of Osiris snuck off. You have to go search for them, which doesn't take too long. Basically, they found a way to go even deeper into the cave. You know, Master Chief is like, "Ayo, maybe we shouldn't do that." But Locke is like, "I don't know, I hear some pretty creepy things coming from the other direction." And, you know, there's a little bit of back and forth, because it's like Master Chief kind of want to follows what totally not offensive Bias is saying, but Locke and Buck and Osiris are like, you know, and they get into a little petty argument until the two, like, Thrasher Flood enemies arrive from earlier, and they, you know, chase you deeper underground, which then sends you into the sort of climax of the mission, where you have to fight, you know, all the new enemies that you've fought so far at the beginning, and then eventually some combat forms are mixed in there as well, until eventually you get to the center of what seems to be some sort of sacrificial altar. I can't really remember what this was supposed to represent, but you basically get to, like, the center of this sacrificial altar, which then, you know, forces you to do both wave defense and a puzzle, because Flood infection forms and the occasional combat form and carrier form will just repeatedly spawn until you solve yet again another reasonably basic puzzle. Basically, you just have to melee, like, 3 switches in a precise order, and the order is told to you through the through the sort of cave painting-esque engravings on the wall. You know, I don't exactly know how, like, it would be subtly encoded to you. I guess if I had to make a sort of prediction, it would be something like... I guess it would be something like... I don't know, maybe it could be something as stupid as, like, Stickman bonking different animals on the head, and each button has an animal symbol on it, you know, and then you have to do, like, right to left, instead of left to right, you know, and it's, yet again, it's a very simple puzzle, but after you complete the puzzle, you know, all the runes start glowing, like, you know, initially they start glowing dark blue, and then as if it's some kind of corruption, it then glows bright orange, and the center of the room scales upward until it brings you into a different section of the underground of the Shield world. More of a sort of typical section, you know, a sort of typical bit of Forerunner architecture, you know, metallic walls and stuff. And it's here that you meet Sentinels for the first time, but they're not nice Sentinels because, you know, they're Sentinels infected with the Logic Plague, and the Sentinels, you know, and and this is where you get your formal introduction to the Monitor of the Shield world, who basically expositions to you about his name and how he was infected by the Logic Plague and how great his life has been ever since, before instructing the Sentinels to kill you. And on that note, because I have no idea how much longer this is going to go on for, and my voice fucking hurts, I think it's about time we take a sip of coffee. Are you guys ready? Not the best slurp I've ever done, but, you know, we make do. Alright, so, mission 5 we're on now, I think, takes you into a similar thing. You're still in Blue Team's perspective, and, or Blue Team / Osiris's perspective, and the mission kind of functions like the library. It's kind of like 2 betrayals in the library mixed into one. Basically, you fight your way through Sentinels, and accompanying the, like, 3 main forms of Sentinels. Basically, one Sentinel... There's 3 kinds of Sentinels you face throughout the mission. One kind of Sentinel uses a beam of light that melts your shields really fast, but does barely any damage to your health. Another type of Sentinel is the opposite, you know, its beam is a different color, and that beam does lots of damage to your health, but barely anything to your shields. And then the third type of Sentinel can just heal the other 2 kinds of Sentinels, if left unchecked. You know, and then alongside that, you've got all the Flood forms from earlier. Basically, it's an environment pretty similar to the, like, Codex place you encounter in the real Halo Infinite. Kinda similar to that, but imagine more of a sort of primitive and Resident Evil aesthetic to it. You know, yet again, very dingy, very oppressive, very ruined and abandoned looking, not like the Forerunner architecture you're used to seeing. And the mission basically ends with a climactic chase where you have to where the only puzzle in the mission is right at the end, where you basically have to, like, collect, like, a sort of Forerunner fuse box and do something else in order to basically hotwire this Forerunner transport vehicle, which kind of looks like a jackrabbit, but a jackrabbit that you've, like, turned around and reversed to make it look like a V, and then, so that everybody can fit in it, and then you do this little driving sequence out, and you pass, like, all these, like, Forerunner scanner things that, like, scan you and shine green, and, and shine green after you, after you go through them, and then eventually a big door opens at the end, which takes you outside, right back into the jungle of the normal planet, and boom, bombshell, big ass Forerunner ships are in the air, or Promethean ships. Basically, my idea for all the Promethean ships was basically, take all of the Forerunner weapons, scale them up, and, that's about it, really. Basically, like, half Star Wars, and half, I guess, UNSC-like sort of stuff. Where the ships are sort of upscaled versions of the Forerunner guns. Well, I guess I should stop calling them Forerunner, and I should probably keep calling them Promethean. Promethean guns like the light rifle and the binary rifle and stuff. Yeah. And you see, like, a large group of those in the sky, and, like, all the Spartans have a sort of, oh shit, the nasty bitch has found us sort of moment. And then, on that cliffhanger, you now switch back to the Arbiter's perspective, as him and a group of militia, as well as the president guy, are trying to maneuver around the ruins of the capital city that you escaped from in Mission 3. And basically, your objective for this mission is pretty simple. Basically, fight through the battleground outskirts of the city in your first experience with large-scale combat in this game, to basically, three-way battles between the Banished, the UNSC, and the Swords of the Abiding Truths. And all throughout the ruins, and you basically pick up more and more groups of UNSC, militia, and troops as you go along, until you finish the mission. Basically, sort of imagines Tsavo Highway from Halo 3, and mixed with that mission from Halo 3 ODST, where you play as Buck, and you, like, drive through the zoo, and then, like, halfway through the mission, a giant bridge blows up or something. Basically, sort of combine those two missions together, and you've kind of gotten a pretty good gist of how this mission would flow. No puzzles, no, like, interesting gimmicks. The only gimmick is that it's the first real vehicle mission of the campaign. And it's, and yes, it is the mission where you get formally introduced to the Grizzly tank. But initially it starts off where you're just walking around the outskirts, and you engage in a couple smaller scale, just to get used to fighting the Banished, and to get you used to fighting brutes again. You basically just encounter a few small groups of them. I guess the opening is kind of akin to the second mission in Halo CE, a little bit. Especially with the way that you see banished spirits above you. And you can, if you explore enough, you can maybe find, like, a rocket launcher lying around, which will allow you to actually blow up one or two of the transports before they have the chance to, unleash their Banished horrors. The Banished basically have mostly the same units roster they had in Halo Wars 2 in this game. You know, and basically the Banished in this game is just exactly how they were in Halo Wars 2. My, like, 10-year-old brain made, like, no real alterations, I don't think. So, yeah, yeah, and you get introduced some of their vehicles, like the Blisterbacks and their variants of the Ghosts and that. And maybe there'd be one section where you also have to fight a Goliath as well. I feel like that'd be cool as like a sort of boss fight. You know, and after that, basically, you all go back up to the Infinity, and fucking, what's his name? I forgot his fucking name, what is his fucking name? I said it earlier. Lasky. Yeah, and, yeah, so you take, you know, and Lasky basically goes on about, you know, how Cortana's, like, done a sort, like, over the past few days, Cortana's done a rampage throughout the galaxy, you know, and with the help of the Guardians, she's been basically making one giant spearhead towards this singular shield world, and now she's got this shield world surrounded, and he believes it to be the same shield world that Blue Team and Osiris went to, and he's like, we have to go get them, they're our last, you know, they're our best assets. And then, you know, and then Arbiter's like, nah mate, they can handle themselves, we have bigger concerns, you know, and he's like, two objectives, we need to find bigger, more powerful allies, and we need to, you know, number one, we need to find more powerful allies. Number two, we need to find the shipmaster. And the president guy that you saved over the course of Mission 3 and Mission 6, you know, he then comes up with a great idea. You know, basically, he sort of very briefly brushes over, like, some of the most general details of, you know, that one comic where, the last comic that Arthas appeared in, you know, and basically gives a rough suggestion of his whereabouts, and Arbiter's like, plot a course there, you know, if you're not gonna go there, then I'll go there myself, you know, and Lasky's like, why does everybody hate me? You know, and Lasky's, you know, and then the cutscene is sort of split between the Arbiter and Lasky, you know, where basically Lasky's half is Lasky sort of having a heart-to-heart with himself on the bridge of the Infinity, like he did, you know, sort of supposed to mirror that conversation he had with Master Chief at the end of Halo 4. You know, basically, like, having some memories from Halo 4, and especially serving under Del Rio, you know, and Lasky sort of questions whether maybe he's starting to become like Del Rio, you know, and even starting to sympathize with Del Rio, and sort of deciding that he doesn't want to be like that, and he doesn't want to be a bitch, you know, and then, you know, this is how Palmer and, the guys that were in, you know, Fireteam Raven, or like Spartan Team Raven, or whatever they were called, Flame, or whatever the fuck they were called, like in Spartan Ops, you know, so Palmer and her team, basically, you know, they're reintroduced, and they're like, we stand by you, you know, and they, you know, and Lasky feels a little bit better, you know, meanwhile, Arbiter, you know, this is then when Arbiter returns to the rest of the Swords of San Helios, and you get to actually meet them all for the first time. You know, and Arbiter basically gives them a rundown of the situation, and each of them takes their own little, raiding party to go search out, like, some of the old Covenant remnants, like, underground Covenant remnants, and generals, and, in general, people they think that would be useful to their cause. And, obviously Arbiter goes alongside and Arbiter goes by himself to this random, like, cluster of asteroids where the shipmaster is supposed to be. And after seeing the shipmaster's fleet just sort of laying there in space, he does a life scan detection and detects no life. That's then when you spend the first half of the campaign searching along the asteroids. You basically, you have a Phantom, a drivable Phantom, and you fly the Phantom around from asteroid to asteroid, encounter it. Basically the whole thing here is you get some more opportunities to fight the Banished. Or was it the Banished, or was this supposed to be your introduction to the Prometheans? No, it was the Banished. Yeah, for a very particular reason. Basically you have some small-scale engagements with the Banished, nothing too amazing, and then eventually, you come into view of, after you manage to push past, you manage to collect, some stuff. Basically, I can't exactly remember much about this one. I gave barely any thought to this mission as a kid, but basically, you drive in a Phantom around, each asteroid, small encounters with the Banished. It's a very short mission, and then at the end of the mission, you come across the Halo. But not just any Halo, because it ends with a communication from not just the shipmaster, but from Anders as well. Yeah, I told you the Halo Wars 2 legendary ending was going to come into this. And if you remember anything about that ending, you know exactly what's going to happen next as Arbiter, descends down to the Halo ring to go pick them up. So, basically, the Arbiter is not just bringing home the Shipmaster and his fleet, but he's also bringing home Anders and the Spirit of Fire as well. Yeah, that's gonna be fun once we get there. But Mission 8 takes us back to Master Chief and Team Osiris, as we find them mid-combat between a group of Promethean crawlers in the middle of the jungle. And Chief gets another Cortana vision, where Cortana's like, come on, Chief, stop playing so hard to get. And Chief's like, bitch, what the fuck are you saying? Basically Cortana's like, gives him one warning: whatever you do, don't go near the ruins. So what the fuck does Chief do in Mission 8? He goes near the fucking ruins, of course he does. Basically, this whole mission, you're just fighting the Prometheans. It's the Prometheans you already know: knights, crawlers, watchers, soldiers, stuff like that. And it ends with a boss fight against an Alpha Knight. Basically, it's a Promethean knight, but he looks a bit scarier, and he's purple instead of orange. Yeah. Yeah, so... yeah, the mission is pretty uneventful. Yet again, I didn't have too many plans for this one, other than basically you fight Prometheans, and yet again, you probably do a little bit of basic platforming here and there, and I don't think there was any puzzles that I thought of for this one. Very similar sort of jungly environment, but but a lot of this, like, the first half of the mission will be in the same sort of swampy jungle environment, but then after that you get into some larger scale encounters, and you get to actually experience some of the new Forerunner vehicles for the first time in sort of medium to large size sort of grassland areas, or like forest clearing sort of thing. And then the mission ends with Chief and the gang entering the ruins, to find it all flood infected and shit, with the same, cave painting-esque drawings and, you know, near fossilized ancient blades and tools, you know, from seemingly various eras, you know, even with some remnants of clothes being able to be found on occasion. And when you reach the center, you again find another offensive bias. I'm sorry, I meant totally not offensive bias terminals, and basically he congratulates you on a well done, but questions why it took you so long to get here. Basically, he says that, you know, and this is where he basically says that the key to the domain is here, you just have to find it, and Mission 9 is just basically a free roaming mission. You know, you have the chance to encounter both small groups of Prometheans and Flood, but mostly Flood just laying around, and on very rare occasions you can basically bait the Prometheans into fighting the Flood. But that's about it. You also, you know, the only notable thing about this mission, really, is that this is supposedly the first time you have the Gravemind shit that you had from Halo 3. You have like one or two of those as the Gravemind decides to formally introduce himself to you. And by the end of it, you basically find, like, you know, you find essentially the ancient human version of a Google link, you know, that they then input as a code into the terminal, which then leads them directly to essentially the forerunner version of a Wikipedia page about the domain, which is then when they learn about the domain's connection to the Ark. Yeah, baby, I told you this was inspired by Halo 3. But Master Chief is also, you know, still going through it a little bit with Cortana, and he's like, God damn it, I still really want to suck on those big fat titties, you know, so he doesn't want to leave just yet, and he's like, well, how the fuck do we leave? you know, and Locke's like, yeah, good question, how do we leave this shithole? You know, and then, like, they basically formulate a plan of escape of basically faking getting captured by the Prometheans, so that A, Master Chief can get close to Cortana, and maybe Master Chief will have one final go at being able to convince Cortana to turn to their side, and they then get to ride the and they basically tell the Prometheans and lie to them that there's something really important at the Ark that they need to go and find right fucking now. You know, basically they want to trick Cortana into taking them to the Ark. So that's exactly, so, you know, and that goes basically as planned. You know, one of them said, you know, they like set off a flare or something, and they let themselves get sort of arrested by the Prometheans, who beam them up to meet Cortana. Cortana, you know, basically tells like her Promethean minion things to take all the others somewhere else, you know, where they will, you know, carry out their side of the plan. You know, and then Master Chief gets a one-on-one time with Cortana, except the Warden Eternal just kind of just stands there in the background menacingly. Yeah, and basically the conversation goes exactly as expected for such a climactic finisher. Master Chief does manage to sort of convince Cortana. You know, Cortana's not exactly abandoning her ways, but Cortana is like, maybe. Well, you know, and she's like, well, maybe just for one last time. One last hurrah. You know, and she agrees to cooperate with Chief. This causes the Warden Eternal to get really pissed off, so Cortana dismisses him, kind of like how she does in Halo 5 that time. You know, yet again, remember this for later. So as they prepare to, you know, set off for the Ark, skip back to the Arbiter's perspective as he and a group of elite Spec Ops descend onto the surface of the ring. You know, where, like, Anders manages to link him their location, and basically it's got a reasonably similar structure. You know, basically you fight some Prometheans there, and, you know, yet again it's got to focus on three-way battles between you, the Prometheans, and the Banished, who are also there. You know, and it's a sort of three-way battle, and I think yet again the only real meaningful thing to it is, other than, you know, getting to meet the Spirit of Fire and the reintroduction of Arthas, you also get to fight alongside the Sentinels in one section. There's probably, I think there was intended to be another puzzle section in this level to do with, you know, I think it's probably just something to do with, like, setting up some platforms a couple times, you know, and interacting directly with the Forerunner architecture. And I think there was also, like, some optional puzzle bits you can do to, like, basically summon the Sentinels, like, in a couple locations. And I think there was even one where, as a sort of Easter egg thing, basically you can turn on these lasers which will, like, kill off an entire encounter of Banished, like, before you even fight them. But other than that, basically, very Halo Infinite-like environments, just lots of forests and that, with the Guardian just hanging menacingly in the background. You know, once you get to the station, you know, Anders and Arthas basically give you the rundown of the situation. That basically they've been trapped here because the Guardian is doing Guardian shit and it physically won't let them leave. You know, and just as, you know, an Arbiter basically plans a way that they can use stealth ships to get out, just as they're doing that, the Warden Eternal catches on, and instead of, you know, and you get to have a boss fight with the Warden Eternal, because, why not? Because that was everybody's favourite part of Halo 5, am I right, guys? Yes, you have a little boss fight with the Warden Eternal, and the mission ends with the defeat of the Warden Eternal, and then leading directly into the next mission, where you then have to take, you know, some good old-fashioned revenants, you know, alongside, like, Arthas' own men and some of your own men, and basically it's another vehicle mission where you do some, you know, pretty large-scale vehicle combat, mainly against the Prometheans, but with the Banished mixed in there as well. You know, you do some stuff, like, in terms of, like, utilising the Sentinels a bit more and learning more about the Sentinels and Anders' newfound connection with Forerunner technology, as well as also getting some info dumps about the Guardians as well, before making it to the stealth ships and escaping. You know, but as you go to jump, the Guardian suddenly lets out one of its, like, supersonic bursts, which then interrupts the slip space portal and ends up hurtling the Arbiter through a new slip space portal, which takes him directly to the Ark, where Cortana's fleet is just waiting. And cutscene end, cut to black, to Captain Lasky in the Infinity, like, suddenly getting a connection to another few stray UNSC ships that are left AI-less and stranded out in space. You know, in this mission, you get to take control of Palmer, and basically you get to take control of Palmer, and you get to fight across the hull of one of these ships as they, you know, and you get to fight across the hull of one of these ships with mantises, you know, to clear off the Swords of the Abiding Truth on top of it. And the leader of the ship basically tells you that, like, that the Guardians have all spread out across the galaxy, basically confirming kind of what you already know. The Guardians are spread throughout the galaxy, and they're keeping everything policed, whilst for some reason a large portion of the Promethean fleet is at the Ark, and Lasky is like, the Ark, we need to get to Earth, but like, the guy's like, nah mate, we ain't getting to Earth, there's 2 Guardians on that shit, the moment we arrive at Earth, we are fucking done, mate, and at that point, Lasky's like, well, what's the point, what the fuck do we do, like, if we can't get to Earth and everybody's at the Ark, how the fuck are we supposed to get there? And that's when, Halsey manages to report that she managed to get the Infinity's AI working again, as a sort of happy twist, and the Infinity's AI basically comes up with a way to use, like, one of the Halo rings that Halo ring from Halo 4? To basically try and use that as a way to get to the Ark. But then everybody shoots that down as an absolutely stupidly retarded idea. And instead, they just decide to lock on to... They just decide to try and log on to Cortana's signal, and then just slip space jump towards that endlessly until they get there. Cut back to the Arbiter, who, cut back to Master Chief and the others who are released now and all on Cortana's thing, and, Master Chief is basically briefing them that Cortana isn't exactly on their side yet, but, she's not a good guy yet, but for now she's on their side because she wants to kill the Flood and get rid of the Banished. This is then when Captain Cut is introduced to them. The Warden Eternal basically has a baby rage moment, and the Warden Eternal actually takes control. Yeah, this is the surprise twist, and this is how the mission opens. The Warden Eternal, it actually starts off with a Warden Eternal boss fight. You defeat the Warden Eternal, and the Warden Eternal basically causes the Great Schism, but the Promethean edition. So you have to Truth and Reconciliation your way through the Forerunner ship with Cortana's direct help, just like old times. And the ship is complete chaos, and this is like one of the few, basically Cortana's Prometheans are blue and the enemy Prometheans are orange. That's the only real distinction between them. And this is where you get formally introduced to every single kind of Promethean in the game. You fight your way through the halls of the ship until you get to the fighter bay, and and Master Chief does like an epic Halo 3 like finishing the fight reference. As you and the boys hop on some Promethean fighters and basically get into this sort of Long Night of Solace section, where you connect with the Arbiter, and basically, like, the Arbiter's got the shipmaster and that, and Arbiter's, like, gathering up all the sorts of Sanghelios fleets, and all the allies they've managed to accumulate, as well as also you get to see that the Banished fleet has arrived, and basically you get this, like, you get to actually play through the beginning parts of this, and it's basically a sort of Star Wars Battlefront 2-esque section, where you basically have to cover some of the Arbiter's bombers in the fighter, as, destroying the fighters of the Warden Eternal, and you have to also fight some Seraphs and Banshees, some banished Seraphs and Banshees. So, yeah, you do that, and you have to escort a squadron of bombers to one of the big Promethean transport ships and blow that shit up. And then after you blow that shit up, shit just goes absolutely fucking crazy. And it's this big epic space battle, you know, and initially you're kind of on the back foot, and Arthas Verdum gets to do one of his epic speeches, as suddenly, not just as suddenly the Spirit of Fire and Captain James Cutter joins you, but then all of the fucking, Swords of Sanghelios ships suddenly jump in like it's fucking Avengers Infinity War, and then the fucking Infinity joins in, you know, and then it's literally like, imagine the Battle of the Ark cutscene, but like way bigger scale and higher budget. You know, you have the entire Banished fleet now fighting a civil warring, like great schisming Forerunner fleet, which is also fighting a couple UNSC ships and the UNSC Infinity, which is also fighting the entire Swords of Sanghelios fleet, and it's this giant three-way space battle. And it's just absolute fucking chaos. So Master Chief and Lasky have some talk, and basically, you know, they go to set down some ground operations. Captain Cutter gives you some coordinates, and Cortana agrees to go on your side again, and she's kind of seen, you know, and yet again it at least appears as if she's seen the error of her ways. So, you know, this whole mission next up is basically a giant reference to Halo 3's Ark mission, and, so you and the boys go down there, you know, but the initial sort of confrontation is very Silent Cartographer-esque, you know, where Blue Team, Osiris, the Arbiter, and Red Team all disembark on this beachhead, and you have to secure this beachhead first from the Banished. So after you secured the beachhead from the Banished, you meet up top with some jackrabbits, and you get to drive around the jackrabbits alongside some of the other troopers into a couple small-scale vehicle engagements against the Warden Eternal's Forerunners, Prometheans, and against the Warden Eternal's Prometheans, and basically, and then after that, you see, the Infinity actually break atmosphere, and, suddenly you get a Grizzly tank, some Warthogs, and Scorpions drop down, and then you have this big fucking vehicle section where you're going, where you're scaling up these mountains whilst fighting the Banished, to, clear them out of this heavily entrenched position they're in, before reaching the top, and you reach another one of the offensive bias things, and this is when offensive bias basically comes clean and admits that he's offensive bias, and basically, you know, confirms a lot of what we already knew about the terminal conversations from Halo 3, before basically giving Chief a cryptic warning that the Flood are coming back to the Ark, but also that the Flood never left. Yet again, a reference to Awakening the Nightmare. You know, and to basically be wary. This is then when a bunch of wasps arrive, and you get to drive a wasp, and you get this, aerial vehicle section, where you know, very sort of New Alexandria-esque, where you have to fight loads of, Phaetons, and I think there was another, 2 Promethean aerial vehicles that this section was supposed to introduce for variety's sake. And you fight those, and whilst you're fighting those, you'll get this randomized mission system from New Alexandria. You know, it could be escorting Pelicans filled with supplies to the front line, or it could be providing some ground support to troops getting bogged down on the ground, etc, etc. It's completely a set of 8 or something random objectives, but you only have to complete 3 of them before Lasky will then give you your next directive to go meet up with Palmer and her team. You know, as those and a strike team of ODSTs are trying to secure... You know, are trying to secure a Forerunner structure up north. So you take the Wasps and, you know, you do some strategic damage to some of the Prometheans on the ground before getting into a fight with some banished Goliaths. And then fighting your way through a couple of encounters of smaller banished patrols until you get inside of the Forerunner station where Atriox gives you a little bit of a message. Then you get one of the Gravemind things, and Cortana basically has a fucking PTSD moment from Halo 3. You know, from her experience in during Halo 3. And yeah, and then you meet up with Palmer and her strike team of ODSTs, and you fight your way to the center of the facility, where you activate the arcs, you know, you do the same thing that you do in Halo 3 and activate all the Sentinels and all the arcs natural defense systems. You know, and the Sentinels so far are, well, on your side. This is then the end of the mission cutscene where Atriox gives you another message basically saying how stupid you are and how foolish you are to have done this, don't you know what you're about to unleash? You know, which then kind of leads into the next mission. You know, which then kind of leads into the next mission where the Arbiter and a strike force of elite spec ops, also accompanied by maybe one of the other members of the Swords of Sanghelios, head to, one of the desert facilities on the Ark. You know, where, you know, you get, basically it's a flood mission. You go through this flood containment facility, and it basically gives you a bunch of lore dumps about the new flood forms, and as well as gives you hints about a possible cure to the flood, you know, and loads of stuff like that. The mission, yet again, pretty simple. The most notable thing would be a couple basic puzzles, as well as fighting the flood, maybe the introduction of a new flood form or something, as well as the introduction of flood-infected vehicles. You know, but other than that, it's just a fairly run-of-the-mill flood mission, just to sort of introduce them onto the Ark, with the most influential bit being the ending cutscene where you see the flood from the Shield world have hijacked one of the Guardians and made it to the Ark. So now one of the Guardians is infected by the Logic Plague. This is then when we skip back to Master Chief's perspective as he enters into a large-scale battle to secure the Ark's cartographer with some help from Cortana's Prometheans. You know, so basically Blue Team, as well as some Marines and Prometheans, battle their way into the cartographer through a mixture of forest and desert environments. You know, as well as you get a lot of picturesque scenery, as now a lot of the space battle above takes place in the atmosphere of the planet. You know, so you get to see lots of cool shit in terms of that. There's maybe a Mantis section or two as well. You know, it's basically another mission focused on just really large-scale combat. The main enemy will be the Banished, but there'll be still a pretty good amount of Warden Eternal Prometheans. And you'll get to see a lot of battles between the Banished and the Prometheans too. As well as, obviously, you'll get the joy of watching Cortana's Prometheans and the Warden Eternal's Prometheans fight once more. And other than that, yet again, another fairly run-of-the-mill mission, and then Offensive Bias will have another cryptic message for you, 3/4 of the way through the mission. You know, where basically he'll give you a little bit more information about mendicant bias, basically say that you have to go wake him up, you know, since only offensive bias and mendicant bias together can truly put a stop to the threat that's about to come, you know, but then says that the only way to truly revive a sleeping giant is through the domain, you know. However, he doesn't really elaborate further, and you get to the cartographer and activate the cartographer. However, Cortana manages to hijack the cartographer to instead show you a map of the domain. So Master Chief heads off on his own to the domain, whilst Blue Team joins up with Osiris. With Osiris, you then head into a mission where where you've got to take out this AA battery so that the Infinity and all the other UNSC ships can launch, can send out some longswords and launch an all-out assault on the flood-infected Guardian to see if they can do anything to her. Basically, the plan is that they're gonna nuke the fucker, and they're just gonna drop loads of nukes on her. I know I'm flying through these quite fast now, and I'm not going into as much detail. It's because, well, I don't remember a lot of these missions in great detail. I just remember the broad strokes, and, honestly, I'm getting kinda tired, so I just want to get this over and done with. So, yeah. Maybe I'll even expand on these in a future rant, I don't know. But anyway, yeah, so basically you get, the mission starts off with probably some Wolverine gameplay. It's probably the only, major Wolverine section in the game, just to show that, hey, we have Halo Wars vehicles now. Whereas the Wolverines, driving the Wolverines around, you basically have to blow the banished Banshees and Seraphs out of the sky so that the Kodiaks can get to their position and clear out the Blisterbacks, which then allows you to head into some smaller scale battles with the Banished, which then ends up getting you into a bit of a boss fight with one of the Banished generals, very Halo Infinite style, and that covers most of the first half of the mission. Then the second half of the mission focuses mainly on larger scale three-way battles between you, the Prometheans, and the Banished, and a lot of these, will utilize the Ark's environment in some very creative ways to make them more dynamic, but are mostly on for encounters with probably the odd, Warthog section, and eventually you, get to this part where you have to activate this, all these, Forerunner anti-air things, and, the Forerunner AA things manage to take down the Guardian's already damaged shields, as the UNSC launch their all-out attack, and, I mean, they don't really do that much damage to the Guardian itself, but they at least seem to have pissed off the Gravemind, because even Osiris gets the Gravemind, mindfuck thing, and god does he sound pissed. As all of a sudden the flood balls from Halo 3 start raining down on that side of the Ark, and the rest of the mission is a Warthog run to get back to the Pelican to exfil safely. So now you go back to Master Chief's perspective for this game's version of the Cortana mission. So the first half of the mission has you fight and through what seems like endless, basically very library style, every single flood form possible is thrown at you, and the only help you have is from the Ark Sentinels and from Cortana's Prometheans. Once you get halfway through the mission, and the main puzzle and gimmick of the mission is you basically activate the portal into the domain. Cortana gives you a warning that once you go in, you can never come back, and you're about to step through until the Warden Eternal shows up, and you get yet another Warden Eternal boss fight, and the Warden Eternal this time is a little bit coked up, because he's got some extra limbs, and he looks like that one enemy from Resident Evil 3 in its final form. You know, he's like all fucking coked up and he's looking like a guardian and he's, you know, and it's the hardest Warden Eternal boss fight in the game by far, trying to show kind of how desperate he is at this point. So after you get rid of the Warden Eternal, you enter the domain and you encounter Sergeant Johnson and Captain Hood and... No, not Captain Hood, sorry, Captain Keyes and Miranda Keyes. And they basically give you a lot of, you know, you basically go on a walk and talk with them and they give you loads of exposition. Basically, this is when it gets explained to you that all of the Cortana visions happened in the domain. And this is kind of heaven, basically. The domain is basically heaven. It's where all the hero spirits go. You know, maybe Sergeant Johnson describes it as Valhalla or something. And, you know, initially you're like, damn, these guys are like actually back. But then, like, the moment their walking and speaking time is over, they all fade away into blue light and, well, the world suddenly doesn't look so normal anymore. Basically, the whole walking and talking section takes place for a sort of digital recreation of Master Chief's hometown, and it's supposed to be a very sort of character development moment for Master Chief, you know, as well as a moment to do a lot of fan service in a very short amount of time. After that, you basically retrace all of Master Chief's memories through the domain, and then eventually you come to the Didact, and you have a long conversation with the Didact who basically apologizes to you and makes up to you and says that it wasn't him, you know, he wasn't truly being him and he was also infected by the Logic Plague. Basically tells you that the only way to stop the flood and to contain everything, to just reset the universe to how it was before he came along, is to destroy the Guardians. And the only one who has the power to destroy the Guardians is Mendicant Bias and Offensive Bias, if they should put their combined grand intelligences and powers together. You know, the Didact also then proceeds to tell you the exact location of where Mendicant Bias is. You know, this is then when finally you come to a boss fight with Cortana herself. You know, basically, you know, very sort of, I guess, like, you know, it's a very psychological boss fight, you know, where you basically just have to defend yourself against Cortana's attacks, whilst basically this is supposed to be a metaphorical representation of Master Chief's guilty conscience over all the people who have died, you know, including book-only characters, as well as also Master Chief's own guilt over how he blames himself for how Cortana turned evil, you know. And you basically fight through the manifestation of that before the good Cortana forms out of the remnants of data from that, and she, you know, kind of asks you, like, did you find what you were looking for? And the two of you kind of have a very touching moment, and Cortana actually takes you to the exact place in Halo 4, and Cortana explains that that place in Halo 4 was the domain. And basically, the only reason why Master Chief can essentially enter the domain at his will when other people can't whilst they're alive is because Cortana had already sort of imprinted his DNA in the domain and allowed him to enter whenever he wanted. And this is the, you know, magical moment where the two of them make up and agree to be friends, and Cortana puts herself as a chip inside of Master Chief's helmet yet again, as now the last part of this mission is to fight you know, you then get a really bad Gravemind thing. The Gravemind's really, really pissed, and he's like, I will awaken the flood. I will do what the other Graveminds couldn't, you know, all sort of villain shit like that. And you know, have to fight against some infected sentinels alongside all of the flood, you know, as Cortana directs you out of the building and towards a Forerunner fighter that you take out. then you skip back to the Arbiter's perspective as the Arbiter, alongside another 2 members of the Swords of Sanghelios, and alongside Red Team, head into, you know, basically, make the operation, you know, basically make the operation to go try and track down Master Chief. However, they're interrupted when their Pelican is shot down by some Promethean forces in the middle of, you know, an area very similar to Sierra 117. You know, so the first half of the mission has you fighting through that area, yet again with a lot of symbolism to do with ancient humans. And after you do that, you end up coming across, you know, that Halo 3 map, with the city? Basically, that turned into a mission where you have to, basically that turned into a mission where you fight some Prometheans, and you uncover, and you basically uncover a dormant fragment of some Forerunner AI, which isn't Mendicant Bias. And after that, you then get interrupted by Master Chief, who, tells you that he's on the way to this certain location on the Ark, and he wants you there. So, and, like, the others are like, maybe we shouldn't. But then Arbiter's like, no, if Master Chief says it's important, then it's fucking important, bitch. So, yeah. So then you fight your way through the forest until you get to another one of these little waterfall caves, which has this portal in that basically requires you to just do a puzzle. It's another short, simple puzzle, probably something to do with, like, codes on a wall again. And then you go through the portal, where the Arbiter kind of, where the Arbiter kind of has, like, a couple visions of, like, his early life in the Covenant. Like, specifically the moment he was first appointed as a shipmaster, before ending up in the desert and Artas being like, Arbiter, where the fuck are you? You just, like, fucking teleported. And Arbiter, tells him where he is. And Artas tells him to watch out because there's a lot of Prometheans and Sentinels in the area and they don't seem friendly, almost like the Sentinels are protecting something. So you then have to fight your way through some Sentinels and Prometheans until you reach a crashed Promethean fighter that has Master Chief in. Then Arbiter and the Master Chief have a bit of a moment together, and Arbiter's like, what the fuck happened? And Master Chief's like, I crashed. And basically it's just like, the Gravemind started to get into Master Chief's head at the wrong time and it caused him to crash. So then the next mission carries on. It's the penultimate mission and it carries on directly from this, with you now as Master Chief, now with the boys all together, now fighting your way through the desert wasteland, to go activate, like, a certain, in another one of these more open world missions, basically, you have Sentinels and Prometheans to fight, and you have to activate, like, 6 of these pillars, which then allows you to go inside of this temple, sort of like you're on the outskirts of that multiplayer map, Guardian. Yeah, so you then go into there, and you, and you go into this temple, and you see all this, like, ancient Forerunner technology, and Mendicant Bias starts communicating with you, like, through the walls and shit, and you have to do some platforming, because Mendicant Bias himself seems to be trying to stop you from, you know, seems to be trying to stop you from advancing towards him, but eventually you advance towards him, and Offensive Bias turns up again and has this sort of heated argument with Mendicant Bias, until eventually Offensive Bias just instructs you on how to reactivate Mendicant Bias. And once you reconstruct Mendicant Bias, you get to, like, see Mendicant Bias's full form, and Offensive Bias also comes out, and you get to see both of their full forms just hovering in the sky, and it's like this awe-inspiring moment. And both of them basically tell you that their plan to stop all of this madness and end the war and to dispel any rumor, you know, basically both of them confirm that the truth is that there is no mantle of responsibility, that it was a lie, that the Forerunner elites made the lie up to try and... Basically, they wanted an excuse to genocide the Precursors, and the Forerunners made up an excuse, and that excuse was the mantle of responsibility. However, it was a sort of pathological lie, because they believed it for so long that it eventually just became a common academic fact. You know, and they basically tell you that how they're gonna solve all of this is basically by getting all the key ships that are left on the Ark and luring all of the Guardians here. And Cortana says that she still has control over the Guardians, so she can call them all to the Ark. Basically, the plan is simple. Call all of the Guardians to the Ark, and cover Offensive Bias and Mendicant Bias whilst they reactivate all of the remaining key ships in the galaxy and get them all onto the Ark, and take the Guardians out in one swift blow. The explosions from the Guardians will then disable every single ship in the atmosphere. So the Arbiter basically sends out the early warning signs, and a full-scale offensive is launched. So the final mission is a long one, and it's got 3 stages. So the first stage is where you get the, you know, very big Halo 3-esque vehicle section. Basically, you get free choice of any UNSC vehicle you want to drive around with, and you basically, you know, absolutely wreck this banished base, and like you wreck all of these banished fortifications and stuff, and you know, to allow the pilots and that through. And it eventually ends with a boss fight with Voridus and Pavium, and you end up killing them both, you know, and that's sort of like the final boss fight and the last hurrah of the Banished for the game. You know, then then in this gauntlet you then get in a Pelican, and you get a very Halo Reach-esque section where you're in the Pelican turret, and you have to shoot down these Promethean Phaetons, you know, whilst also trying not to shoot the friendly Banshees, you know, as these intense dogfights go on in the sky, as you go to this Forerunner thing, which is going, you know, basically this big Forerunner, like, master control thing, like, near the center of the Ark, which basically is going to allow you to turn, with Professor Anders and Halsey's help, basically going to allow you to shut off all of the Ark's defenses and instead open up a portal which is going to allow all the key ships to get there faster. And it's also going to allow Cortana to contact all of the, you know, and it's also going to allow Cortana to contact the Guardians and get them there. So in this section you fight Prometheans only. It starts off with like a sort of Revenant section with you and some elite Spec Ops, you know, like clearing the way to the station and destroying loads of Promethean vehicles. And once you get into the station, you mainly fight alongside Blue Team and Red Team and Osiris, as you escort Professor Anders and Professor Halsey throughout the structure, fighting some sentinels as well on the odd occasion whilst you're inside the structure, and yeah, so you do that, and they, you know, do literally exactly as planned. Mendicant Bias and Offensive Bias congratulate you, and you get to see all the key ships appearing. This is then when you get your final Gravemind message, as he finally realizes what you're up to, and tries to order like all Flood forms to return to the Guardian and the home nest immediately. But it's already too late, because you're on a Pelican, and you actually get to see something quite cool, which is like an infected Promethean, like a couple of infected Promethean ships trying to stand guard. But as a sort of like bonus section, you know, your Pelican with blue team gets shot down, and you get to do like a big ground pound thing, and you get to fight the Flood on the top of one of these like Forerunner corvettes. You know, and you get to do a big Given the Covenant back their bomb reference, and you detonate the engines on it, and then like jump on top of a Phantom that's carrying the Arbiter and all of the swords of Sanghelios elites, including Artas Vadum himself. You know, and then you accompany, you know, you and Blue Team, you accompany them on the Phantom to on top of the, you know, to the final boss, you know, on top of the, you know, yeah. You know, and this is where all of the, you know, so not only all the pure forms from Halo 3 are going to be there, but also all of the new Flood forms from Halo Wars 2 are also going to be there. So the Flood are, like, throwing everything they can at you this time around. And, yeah, as you fight them on top, as you fight them with all of the swords of Sanghelios and all the allies that you've made, including some ODSTs and Marines, you know, you get to do a bit of a Mantis section, you know, as you clear the Flood off of it. You also get to fight alongside some Sentinels as well. And it's all going well, and basically the final boss fight of the entire game is a boss fight against the Gravemind itself, where you basically have to plant like 12 Forerunner bombs onto all of the, you know, onto all of the, like, main pustule egg bits of the Gravemind, whilst loads of Flood abominations and juggernauts try and get at you. So you have to fight the two, like, big mini-boss enemies of the Flood. Basically, how you beat the abominations is you just have to hit the head, and then with the juggernauts, you just have to put a grenade right into its chest. And that's the gimmick on how you take them out, whilst also fighting literally everything. Like, the Flood are getting desperate, and they're throwing everything at you, and then once you kill the Gravemind, you know, you then have to get it. You know, Mendicant Bias basically, offers to use himself as a shield, or like as a ride, and you all hop on board Mendicant Bias, like, as all the key ships arrive and they're like about ready to fire. All the fleets suddenly starts hyperspacing away, but just as you're on Mendicant Bias and you're about ready to leave, all of a sudden the Gravemind, he's still alive! Epic twist! And the Gravemind's tentacles wrap around Mendicant Bias, and in a heroic sacrifice, Mendicant Bias sacrifices himself and activates his self-destruct protocol in place of one of the key ships. And, you know, but the Flood have also gotten onto that key ship as well. So you get one Warthog and you have to do a Warthog run. This is what it's been leading up to. So you have to do the biggest Warthog run of the series, fighting the Flood, and fighting alongside Cortana's remaining Promethean, like, elite guard on the key ship as Mendicant Bias sacrifices himself as all of a sudden you get to see the spectacle of all of the Guardians being blown up at the same time by the key ships. Mendicant Bias sacrificing himself so that Offensive Bias sacrifices himself as well, because he wants to die as a brother with Mendicant Bias to show that they have truly been able to appreciate each other as brothers and have truly gone on their redemption arcs. And using the key ships, you manage to jump to hyperspace just in time to get back to Earth alongside all of the other ships. And from the key ship, which now deactivates without any master controller, you then manage to jump aboard the Infinity as the game ends. Boom! Mic drop. Fucking hell, this has gone on for a while. I mean, I'm gonna be completely honest, I've made half of that up on the spot, because I remember the broad strokes of a lot of this and my original view of Halo 6 and what I thought the campaign was gonna be like before Halo Infinite came out. Yeah, and this is kind of just an extension of that. I've made some stuff up on the spot just to make this more entertaining than me constantly brushing over missions. It's a very long campaign, and I know that resource-wise it would probably be unfeasible, but, I guess I hope you guys have enjoyed hearing my glorified Halo fanfiction. It's out in stores for $9.99, come, next March. Watch out for it. Yeah. So yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. I hope you've enjoyed this second rant video. These are very experimental. Not really gonna bother doing my normal outro because I feel like, well, this serves about as well as an outro anyway, so, bye. Yeah, I hope you've enjoyed, bye.